What ethnicity do you identify as?
Mexican American.
What comes to mind when you hear the word Hispanic?
For me, when I hear the word Hispanic, in my household, it's never really been used. When we use the word Hispanic, it means more of like people from Latin America. So, from Venezuela, from Cuba, off from the south end, where I myself find my cultural roots to be from Mexico, so I consider myself Mexican American.
Okay. What do you think when you hear Spanglish?
When I hear Spanglish, for me myself, growing up, I didn't ever hardly use Spanish. I did grow up in a rural country in the panhandle of Texas. So English was and is my first language. Spanish, I would say, is my second language, even though it's my native tongue. So for Spanglish, it's the combination of English and Spanish. I would say that I use more Spanglish when I do use Spanish, just because I don't know a whole lot of grammatical terms in the Spanish language. And so when I get stuck, I switch back over to English. And so the combination of Spanish and English is where people usually call Spanglish, or just whenever I need it, because I don't really speak Spanish all that fluently. So I definitely do mix the two.
What Spanish influences do you see in Texas?
In Texas, there's a lot of cities that have Spanish names. Lots of people know Texas as Tejas. It was for a very long time owned and governed by Mexico. So I definitely do see a lot of influence. Like I said, I grew up in the panhandle of Texas, so you don't see as much influence up here. Besides some of the cuisine, like a whole lot of Mexican restaurants and smaller stuff like that. I do have family, however, that do live in the Rio Grande Valley, which is just right next to Mexico. And so, as far as seeing Spanish influence in Texas, I would say it's very different from where you're at. So, like here in the Panhandle, like I said, there's not that much besides cuisine. Whereas when you go down there, further south, the language, a lot of people use Spanish predominantly. The cuisine, it's almost all Mexican food. There's not a whole lot of, like up here we have, chicken fried steak, and we're real big on barbecue and whatnot. Where down there's not a whole lot of barbecue unless it's Spanish influenced. So.
How is it different from what you grew up with in your home?
As far as what?
Just like what you see in Texas. Like cuisine
So
wise, or what you see.
like I did say, my family is from way up here, what's considered, North Texas, West Texas. But in my household that I grew up in, we predominantly ate Spanish food. My father does barbecue from time to time, but a lot of the stuff that we had, we had the fajitas, we had enchiladas, gorditas. One of my dad's favorite meals to make was mole, and also caldo de res. That's another one of his favorites to make. So growing up, I know at least once a week we had tacos for dinner, and it was always tacos, rice, and beans. Whereas a lot of my friends in this area, it's your pork chops, your hamburgers. Like I said, it's more barbecue, but for sure in my household, and not to say we didn't have any barbecues that were just barbecue, like Texas barbecue. but I do know that that was a big thing, and that's something I do miss about still living at home. Was I took for granted all the times that we did have, uh, the Mexican dishes and different things like that. And where we live now, I mean, we don't have the time and whatnot to do that. So a lot of our stuff is, like your hamburger helper, your takeout, fast food. Where a majority of the time where I was living, it was always homemade food and it was always Mexican food. So.
How would you say the Mexican food is different from the Tex-Mex restaurants?
I really don't care for a lot of our Tex-Mex restaurants that are around here. A lot of the Mexican restaurants, that a lot of people are like, oh man, that's some of the best Mexican food I've ever had. Like I said, I grew up with it, and I'm kind of biased towards taste. So a lot of the times with the restaurants that we have here, I've noticed the lack of taste. So there's not a whole lot of seasoning, not a whole lot of flavor. You can kind of tell everything's just kind of thrown together with no rhyme or reason. Just a lot of the different stuff is flavorless. And when I think of Mexican food or Spanish food, I think of like full of flavor. Like you're able to taste, pardon me, every just everything and the time and effort put into it. Whereas like a lot of Mexican restaurants, like I said, it's just thaw out this, throw together that, and so I don't know if that's another aspect of it. I do know when, for instance, my grandmother, she was very, very traditional. She made everything from scratch, so she hardly ever went to go buy anything from your grocery store, your supermarket. But she would just make everything from scratch, and so you were able to almost taste like the passion that she put into her food. Because I know for a lot of the older Mexican or Hispanic women, with their dishes, you can a lot of the time, which it sounds kind of funny, but you can really taste the love that they put into it. It's a whole nother aspect of a dish, whereas, like I said, a lot of the stuff here I don't really care for because I think it's more fake. So if me, for my own reasons, if I ever want Mexican food, I'd rather make it myself at home. I don't like going to Mexican restaurants and eating out because I'd rather not pay a whole lot of money for some food that I don't think is very good. But yeah, that might just be me, and like I said, I just grew up with it, so it's, I guess you could say, who I am. And so I'm the guy, a whole bunch of friends go to a Spanish restaurant and, they're all gung-ho on, oh man, these enchiladas are good, or oh man, these gorditas or these tacos. And I'm just like, I'll get the nachos or I'll get a hamburger. I really don't care for it.
What is your favorite traditional family dish?
My favorite family traditional dish is going to be asado verde and asado rojo. So it's a dish that a majority of the time, like I said, with the Spanish culture, for instance, my grandmother always made everything from scratch. And so it's predominantly made when a pig is killed and harvested, and like the day of, with like the really, really fresh meat. And it's just a very flavorful dish. It's just something I really enjoy.
And how do your cultural beliefs differ from those in your immediate circle, like your friends and family?
I would say my cultural beliefs within the Hispanic or Mexican community, it's real big on religion. So a lot of things do focus on religion, and a lot of things do focus on family. Just because it's a way of life. So I know my father, for instance, growing up, he was one of 8 children, so he had a very big household, and he was also the baby of his household. But the thing is like, I remember he says growing up, he had a lot of brothers to look up to, but also to protect him. And That's where I think the whole family aspect is really strong.